Welcome to this weekly draft breakdown. We're still workshopping the name. I'll come up with something better than that at some point. But we're going to talk about 5 to 10 football players every week. If you follow or if you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, King Cold Sports, I'm only saying this because this is also uploaded to Spotify, also to Apple Music, to whatever podcasts that this is uploaded to. We also have video reference on the YouTube channel. So if you check out the YouTube King Cold Sports, we got highlights up. We have stats, a bit more information, but you can also just listen to this. If you're watching this on YouTube and you got a ride 5 a.m. every morning or something like that every week to work or wherever you're going, we're going to have a audio version up as well. I think you can kind of take this in without the video reference. I'm not looking at any video right now. I'm just looking at anyways, we're going to do this every week. Talk about the 5 to 10 guys that we talk about throughout the week on the channel. And I love doing those videos, those breakdowns. They're just a bit more informative. I'm trying to be a bit more PC. I'm trying to kind of toe the line of this is what other people say. This is kind of what I think. On this, this is going to be a bit more. This is what I say. This is kind of what other people think. Going to be a bit more opinionated. And also, I really like when people leave comments on those videos because then we can kind of bring up that right now and kind of have a conversation about this. We tried to do this on Friday and I just ran out of energy halfway through. So I'm going to re-record this. This is going to be live most weeks. So if you got nothing to do on Friday, I think at 6 we're going to do this. Please come back and we'll talk about the other 10 guys that we're talking about this week. But this is going to be on Thursday for future reference. I'm going to make sure I update you guys a lot. It's just a lot of moving parts with kind of finding a free hour for me to do that. Anyway, you guys aren't here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Fernando Mendoza, Keionte Scott, Mike Washington Jr., Jermod McCoy, Caden Curry, Gennings Dunker, and Jakobi Lane. Those are the 6 guys that we're responsible for talking about at least a little bit in this hour-long video, however this ends up taking. We'll get started with the first overall pick, the likely first overall pick, Fernando Mendoza. We need a nickname for him. You guys try to help me come up with that. I've heard Cuban Missile Crisis throw around. I don't really like that for Fernando Mendoza because it kind of makes me think of Aroldis Chapman, a guy that threw 105, as a relief pitcher. I actually think he hit 106 at some point. I don't think Fernando Mendoza necessarily has an arm to be the Cuban Missile Crisis. So if you guys have any ideas, please reach out. But we'll be starting with Fernando Mendoza. Didn't come out of nowhere. I think a lot of people kind of look at this Indiana program. Of course, they made the playoffs last year, very good in 2024, and of course, didn't have an established football program, at least not to the level that the other Big Ten schools have. And they kind of think Fernando Mendoza is a guy that kind of had a sun run in 2025, and that's what really put him in NFL scouts' radars. I actually think that we kind of talked about him a little bit at Cal. I think he showed some NFL traits at Cal, and people started getting excited about him in 2024. I actually saw him play live at Cal in 2024. I saw him play the Florida State Seminoles at Doak Campbell in Tallahassee, and that was actually one of the 2 games that Florida State won that year. I think they also beat Georgia Southern. And Fernando Mendoza got killed in 2024 at Cal. I mean, he took 41 sacks. We'll talk about the sacks later, but I want to get started why Fernando Mendoza is going to go first overall. So like I kind of started with, he's not the Cuban Missile Crisis. I don't think he has the best arm in a draft class like some people are kind of talking about with Fernando Mendoza. I think that it's more about the release that he has. I think it is so smooth. I love how fast the ball gets out. I love how over the top everything is. I never played quarterback. I was never a quarterback coach. I just watch a lot of football, and you can kind of tell once you watch enough, or maybe even if you don't, you can kind of tell the guys that have a clean release or who have really worked on the release. Fernando Mendoza is certainly a guy that every time you just love the way the ball comes out of his hand. That's the foundation that he's worked with. That's what everything that he does so well is kind of founded on. And I just really think that you'll watch a 4-yard pass to the flat, looks exactly the same as a 40-yard pass, where he just throws a beautiful ball down the seam. I really think that he's very consistent with that release. That's what everything starts with. Just kind of reading off his stats. He completed 72% of his passes in 2025. Of course, his Heisman campaign finished with 3,500 yards, 41 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. So certainly a guy that takes care of the ball. But it all starts with the release. So what makes Fernando Mendoza such a good quarterback besides the release? The release is going to allow him to put touch on balls downfield. It's also going to really allow him to time the throws right. And I think that you see him anticipate throws very well, where he does such a good job of understanding a defender's leverage. He'll see that defender kind of sink to one route. That's going to open up a corner route behind his head. And now, like I said, I don't think Fernando Mendoza is just throwing lasers. I don't think he's a guy that's just, you're going to get wowed like, wow, I can't believe he just fit that into that tight window. He doesn't really need to fit a ball into a tight window, because that window never gets tight because of how fast he sees it and how fast the ball gets there, not because of the velocity he puts on it. The velocity is good enough, but because of that release, that clean release, that all starts with the anticipation as well. So he's definitely sees the windows fast enough, and he can execute them on them fast enough, right? Between from him seeing that window to the ball actually getting there, it all happens real fast. To me, it's all because of the anticipation and the release. And then his ability to place balls downfield. I think that you get started with the anticipation and the release, the stuff that I just kind of started with, and then okay, that's pretty good. I think why we're really talking about him being a first overall pick and why you should be excited about drafting this guy first overall is because of the ball placement you'll see downfield. There'll be some throws that Fernando Mendoza makes about 40 yards downfield, and you just cannot believe that the ball got placed where it did. There's maybe one or two spots, and honestly, if you watch the entire clip without the ball getting there, you would kind of say that route's just not open. That's probably a throw that you shouldn't make. Fernando Mendoza makes that throw not because it's a bad read or anything like that. He just knows he can place the ball exactly where that wide receiver only can get it. And I made a video about Carson Beck a while ago. It wasn't about Beck, it was about a receiver. And I was like, yeah, this was not a great throw, but probably should have brought it in. But it just kind of had to be more on the money. And somebody was like, what do you want him to do? Go place it or just go hand it to him? Man, that's what Fernando Mendoza does 40 yards downfield. Looks like, I'm not even sure I could go walk up to a receiver and just place it in his hands better than Fernando Mendoza places it. He's just a very intelligent football player. And that's what it is to me. I know I keep saying that's what it is. There's a lot to like about Fernando Mendoza. And it all starts in a guy that's 6'5" frame, by the way. Didn't even bring that up. Should have started with that. Definitely a guy that you feel good about holding up against the pressure in the NFL because of how big of a football player he is. He's got some room to add some weight. I'll tell you that. 6'5". I think he's listed at, 220. Probably going to talk about him adding some weight, but definitely think he has the room to do that. So, all right. Clearly, I like Fernando Mendoza. What's wrong with him? Why are some people not so excited about him? Or why are people kind of saying, oh, this is a weak quarterback class. This is kind of a weak guy to go first overall. I really don't think that's the case. But I think the reason that some people are kind of talking about that is because of the play extension stuff that you get with Fernando Mendoza. I'll tell you right now, I think he's got some serious, I'm not going to say serious, but that same anticipation that we see downfield, the way that he reads defenders' leverages, he just he can't really do that with the pressure in front of him yet. I think every now and then you'll kind of see him against a 4-man rush, not really feel where he's weak, not really feel where a defender's getting beat, and you'll just see him take some really bad sacks. And he's certainly athletic enough to kind of escape if he makes the right move in the pocket. I just think that you kind of see him bail to the outside a bit more. And to Fernando Mendoza's credit, he really wants to get the ball into the hands of an athlete or somebody that's a much better athlete than him, like he should. It's just he kind of almost does that to his detriment sometimes, where instead of just taking a running lane that presents itself right in front of him, he just kind of tries to bail and tries to find a receiver downfield. And I think he takes a lot of sacks that he's athletic enough to get out of. Just don't think he makes the best decisions in manipulating the pocket. Now, the positive spin of this is that there's other quarterbacks, young quarterbacks, that you kind of worry about them handling the pressure as well. They get that pressure and they turn that into turnovers. They start forcing the ball into a window that they really shouldn't. Fernando Mendoza really avoids those mistakes in 2025. Like I said, he's a guy that only threw 6 interceptions. Instead of trying to force the ball into a window that he shouldn't, he's either going to get rid of it, or he's either going to throw he's either going to get rid of it, or he's going to take a sack, which is obviously the better outcome than throwing an interception. But I just think, especially in the Ohio State game, you just kind of see a running lane develop in front of him, and he definitely has the athleticism to take it. I'm not saying he's going to go turn that into an 80-yard touchdown. I just think that there's some sacks that he took for a 5-yard loss, which is small, but when you consider that he's also passed it on a 5-yard run, it's more like a 10-yard sack when you really think about it. So that was the one thing that happened pretty consistently. And like I said, the arm's just okay. I think the arm is certainly adequate. I think the athleticism is adequate as well. It's just handling the pressure every now and then. It's just kind of what kind of got me worried. And he took 41 sacks in 2024. Of course, the Cal offensive line wasn't great. He took 25 in 2025. And I think we saw it in the national championship as well. Now, I think with a defensive line that can get home with 4, that's where you get worried. But I'll tell you, with Fernando Mendoza, when he does a very good job handling the pressure is when he can see a defense that's blitzing 5 or 6. I think in Fernando Mendoza's head, when he sees 5 or 6 at the line of scrimmage, he kind of gets a big exclamation on top of his head, and he starts speeding up everything. He knows he has to get the ball out real fast or just kind of take a running lane as soon as it develops. There's one play against Oregon where, you watch the bad sacks that he takes, and you just kind of hear me say, oh, okay, he has to do this and this, whatever. And then you watch the one against Oregon, and it's exactly like what it's supposed to look like, where, that first read's not there. Instead of him just kind of evading outside of the pocket, instead of him breaking the pocket, instead of forcing the ball into a window that he shouldn't, he just tucked it and just took off. So I think when he sees, or he can kind of tell that 5 or 6 are coming at him, that's when he really starts to speed up the processing. I just think when a defensive line that can get home with 4, like Ohio State can, like Miami can, I think it gave him some fits in that regard, but definitely think he's athletic enough to do it. I just think it's an experience thing. Like I said, you see the processing happen so easy downfield. He's doing a great job anticipating windows about 40 yards downfield. It's just about anticipating the pocket 4 yards in front of him. And of course, it's a very difficult thing to, physically look at receivers and look at defenders downfield while just kind of feeling the pocket. I think it's going to come with time. It's not a long-term concern. However, I really do think year one, if the Las Vegas Raiders are the team that end up drafted him first overall, they don't do a great job protecting him. I do think you'll kind of see him struggle with that early in his career. Now, with that big frame, I'm not worried about him taking a shot and getting off the field, man. I got to tell you, against Ohio State, we're going to talk about Caden Curry in a little bit. That's a very physical football player, a very violent football player. There was a play that Fernando Mendoza just took a lashing across the mouth from Caden Curry at the beginning of the game, and Fernando Mendoza just kind of like rubbed off his arms, and he was back up, and he finished that Big Ten championship. There was also we all saw the picture of Fernando Mendoza with all the blood and how his like forearms looked all dirty. We saw that first drive against Miami on that read option where he just took a shot again across the mouth after the whistle, or after he handed the ball off. And he just really did not get fazed by that. So I certainly think he has the mentality and then the physical traits, that frame that he has to handle the pressure in the NFL. I just think year one, you might see him struggle with that if the Raiders' offensive line doesn't do a good job of keeping him upright. And you might I think year one, look, I've seen this happen a million times where, people get so excited about a quarterback, for example, guy that won the Heisman, and the anticipation or the expectation year one is for them to do the same thing that they just did against college football defense. They think they're all of a sudden year one they can do that against an NFL defense. I don't think we're going to see that with Fernando Mendoza. You might see him struggle with the pressure year one. I'll tell you right now, he's not going to do it because of a lack of toughness. He's not going to struggle because of a lack of toughness. I just think it's a timing thing, or something he's got to get a bit more used to. And there's one more point I wanted to make. You're going to see NFL fans just talk about how Fernando Mendoza is a bust after year one if they don't do a good job of keeping him upright. When that offensive line gets right, when they get playmakers around Fernando Mendoza like Indiana did in 2025, I think some really special things can happen with him at that quarterback position. But also see some people kind of bring up the RPO offense. He's just kind of doing half field reads, not a whole lot of experience of him rolling out of the pocket and making off-platform throws. So I do think that's also something that you'll hear people kind of concerned about. That was just what he was asked to do at Indiana. I'm not going to get too caught up in it. It just kind of plays into the play extension, right? So it's not just manipulating the pocket and taking off. It's also like, how is this guy when the play breaks down and there is no running lane and there is no receiver downfield? Caleb Williams did such a good job just kind of making stuff happen and, maybe elevating people around him in that regard. I just think Fernando Mendoza's just not ever going to be that. And it kind of starts with the arm strength. Because, like Sam Levitt, I'm just trying to work this out in my head. If you disagree with me, please feel free to reach out and we can talk about it. But like Sam Levitt, a guy I'm really excited. He has all the physical tools that you look for in a quarterback. He's transferring to LSU, a guy that played at Arizona State. Was a guy that I thought we were going to be talking about being the first overall pick this year. He kind of got a foot injury and didn't look the same in 2025, and he's in the 27 draft now. Anyways, talking about Sam Levitt, he is so good off platform because of how strong his arm is. He doesn't need a base to just like whip a throw 40, 50 yards downfield. That's very exciting about Sam Levitt, but Sam Levitt's got a lot of problems, I'll tell you. His shit stinks, I'll tell you that right now. But if he kind of irons it all out, I think we'll be really excited about him. The point I'm trying to make is Fernando Mendoza, there was one throw against Penn State that almost cost him the game. Now, to his credit, he did a great job with that, having that clutch gene and driving him down the field and punching the ball in for a touchdown where he took, 2 shots from the front and the back. He took a shot from the side and the side, and you could take a shot from all over. He did a great job delivering a very accurate touchdown strike to win the game, but there was an interception that he threw that almost cost him the game to begin with, where he kind of broke the pocket, and it was a good decision if he had his feet set. He didn't have his feet set. He tried to force the ball to the other sideline, and the ball just did not have the velocity on it that it needed to get to that receiver, and it was so easy for the defensive back to just kind of cut underneath it. He just threw a duck to the sideline and went for an interception. So I do think that I think that he can get a lot better at manipulating the pocket. I don't think in part because of the arm strength, in part because of the overall athleticism, I don't think that he has as high as an upside as a play extender outside of the pocket. But when you're talking about a quarterback that can make all kinds of throws from inside the pocket and just be a leader and a guy that can really make the players around him better because he's going to put the ball where it needs to be, I definitely think Fernando Mendoza can do that. So if you're running an offense that needs the quarterback to be a Caleb Williams and make all kinds of throws outside of the pocket, look, Fernando Mendoza is not your guy. If you're a team that's going to take Fernando Mendoza serious as your franchise quarterback, and you feel good about the personnel staff that you have to put a staff around him or to put players around him in offensive line and playmakers, Fernando Mendoza is absolutely a guy that is going to make your football team better. Just about what you're looking for in a quarterback, I think that's why you're seeing, finally getting to the point, that's why you're kind of seeing some people kind of pump the brakes on him and they're like, oh, this is not a great first overall quarterback. I certainly do think he's a good first overall quarterback, and I think we'll kind of see that come into fruition in 2 or 3 years. He's getting drafted to a team that, is picking first overall. There's bigger problems than just the quarterback. It wasn't just Geno Smith the reason that they're picking first overall. I could tell you that, but in terms of long-term upside, I'm all in on Fernando Mendoza. You guys let me know what you think about him. Anything that I said, if you disagree, please reach out. I think that's all I wanted to say about Fernando Mendoza. Yeah, great kid. I love the personality, by the way. I think it's genuine. So whatever you're going to say about it, if you think he's kind of dorky, if you think he's kind of corny, I think he's a very genuine guy. I mean, I don't know how you could not be genuine and say the stuff that he does. It doesn't seem fake to me. So talking about the personality, I do think he has the personality that you kind of want to be the leader in your locker room. That was Fernando Mendoza, the other guy that we're talking about that this week that is a likely first overall or first round pick. We're going to try to do 2 first rounders, and then the rest of them are day 2, and then maybe a couple day 3 guys. I really want to get day 3 guys, and you guys just have to reach out. There's so many of them. I mean, you figure there's 32 teams, and then how many rounds in day 3? 4, and then plus the comp picks. There's so many guys that are going to be picked day 3, so kind of want to filter them out with the guys that you want to talk about. But the other first rounder that we're talking about today, Jermod McCoy, defensive back that started his college football career at Oregon State. He transferred in 2024 as a sophomore into Tennessee, where he played so well, and he played so well that he's still getting talked about being a first round pick despite him tearing his ACL after the 2024 season. He did not play a single snap of football all spring, all fall at Tennessee in 2025. We're still talking about him as a first rounder. That's how good that 2024 film was. So I watched the 2024 film. As good as advertised. He is so explosive. The hips are so fluid. He's got great instincts to consistently force turnovers. I think that this is a very premium pick. Is he the first corner in 2026 selected? Me personally, I think if you're running a zone scheme, I can understand why you like this guy better than Mansour Delane. But, doing some early film on Mansour Delane from LSU, the cornerback from LSU, that guy's pretty good. But we're going to keep this about Jermod McCoy. So it's a very interesting conversation. I'm trying to not just talk about the injury the entire time because that's the very interesting thing. Just kind of giving him some credit as a football player. There's one route against Oklahoma in 2024 on Deion Burks, guy that we're going to talk about this draft cycle, where Deion Burks just ran like I don't even remember exactly what the route was. It was like a triple move, and then he was working to the inside, and then all of a sudden it turns into a whip about 10 yards downfield, and you just kind of see Jermod McCoy just backpedal. He's on top of it, and then the hip happens almost as soon as Deion Burks flipped his hips to the outside, and Jermod McCoy's on it the entire time. If you don't know, Jermod McCoy, by the way, is 6 foot. Deion Burks is 5'9", so certainly a guy that's real agile, real twitched up football player. Deion Burks is. Jermod McCoy ran with him real easy. So the hips are so fluid. I think that's going to really translate into him as a man-to-man coverage corner. Also the back pedal when he's playing cover 3, the hips again happen, the fluidity just happens so easily, and then the explosiveness coming downhill. I think it's pretty good. I'm not sure we're going to talk about that quick trigger being necessarily the best. I don't think he's going to jump the highest. I think it's pretty damn good though. And to me, it looks a lot more explosive than it actually is because of the instincts. I think he does such a good job of feeling where wide receivers are without actually looking at them. You need that in zone coverage. We talked about Fernando Mendoza. You look at the receivers and you feel the offensive line or the defensive line. The cornerback, you're looking at the quarterback, you're feeling the wide receiver. Well, the thing about wide receivers, without actually looking at them, those are guys that run 4.4s. They're real fast. Really difficult thing to do. I'm always amazed when I see guys that can do it because I think cornerback's the hardest position to play athletically, to be honest. I think quarterback is the hardest to do mentally. I think offensive line is the hardest to do physically. To me, corner is the hardest to do athletically because you don't only have to be as fast as the wide receiver, you have to be as fast as the wide receiver without knowing where he's going. So you kind of have to be a step ahead of him just to be with him to begin with. Definitely think Jermod McCoy does a good job of anticipating, reading route combinations. He does a good job of and just kind of knowing where to be and where to put himself. And there's one play, I forget who this interception was against. I think it was also the Oklahoma game where he's just sitting on a flat route. He's just sitting and he's on that if it turns into anything, and then he feels a corner coming behind him and he just flips his hips at the right time and he apexes the ball for an interception. That was one of them. He had another one against Alabama in a goal line situation where he just played very patient man-to-man coverage, just let the receiver run his route, and then he apexed the ball. It ended up being like a 40-yard return that he had. So guy that has, I got the numbers right here, 6 career interceptions, then of course didn't play in 2025. That's over 2 seasons. Guy that's definitely has the ball production. I hate that word ball production because it's not a running back. I think interceptions you gotta get thrown at in the first place to actually intercept a football. So anyways, not a big fan of the ball production word, but yes. So now the conversation's about the injury. Something else at 6 foot, he did struggle against Jeremiah Smith, and we've just watched D'Angelo Pons this week. D'Angelo Pons struggled against Jeremiah Smith. Just a very tough wide receiver to guard. Wait till you guys watch the film on Jeremiah Smith. I know that it seems good watching the games live, but you actually watch the film. He's not as good as advertised. I think he's even better than that. I'm so excited about that guy. Anyhow, at 6 foot, you might want a bit of a longer corner, and I don't know if that's a reason to take him off of your board. I don't think it is. I think the overall athleticism, the instincts are too good to get too caught up in him being 6 foot. It's not a deficiency. I just don't think it's an asset that Jermod McCoy has. He's so good at everything else. That's the one thing. But what it all comes down to is how you feel about the injury. So he tore his ACL in camp, in winter workouts and spring workouts in January of 2025. So he was out for the entire season. And I said this on the video that we did, but there's 2 ways to look at it. The first one is, man, he didn't get any spring ball in. He did not play a single snap in 2025. You might have wanted him to tear his ACL later in the season, so he had that whole spring. So he had actual more film up. This is a guy, if you draft him, he's only has 2 seasons of actually playing college football, so he's kind of behind the 8 ball in that regard. And it's you can watch film in that 25 season. I just think it's kind of a waste because he's not working out because he tore the ACL, and he's also not getting better, right? Because he's not on the field and learning from his mistakes. There was a couple times in 2024 where he did kind of turn his head around too much in zone coverage, and that didn't let him react to what was underneath him. I thought that was one thing that had he played in 2025, he probably would have got better at. So that's one way to look at it. The way I'm choosing to look at it is that the timing of the injury was good. It happened in January of 2025, which means he's healthy in January of 2026, which means he's healthy in February of 2026, which means he'll be at the combine. So he's going to be able to run the 40. He's going to be able to do the broad jump, the vertical jump. He's able to do the on-field workouts. He's able to kind of prove to everybody, including myself, including the NFL scouts, including you guys, including everyone, that he's healthy now with a very good performance at the combine, because that is one of those things that you worry about. An ACL, look, I'm not going to try to play it down and make it something that it isn't. It is a serious knee injury. You kind of worry if he's still as explosive, and if the hips, you don't really worry about the hips with the ACL, but you just kind of that overall athleticism. something that you are going to get a bit worried about. He's got the point. He's got the perfect opportunity to prove to everybody that he's healthy now. So I'm really excited to watch him specifically in the combine, because if he is healthy, there's no doubt in my mind that he's a guy that's going in the first round. So yeah, that's my take on Jermod McCoy, but it is a red flag if teams are concerned about him not being fully recovered, if they don't think he's the same athlete that he was on that 24 film. I don't think you can really get mad at them for kind of putting a red flag or putting a red dot on his draft card or on his evaluation, because that's one of those things that just kind of takes you off of boards. They're really worried about that injury history, but really excited to see him at the combine. I think he's in a great position to kind of move past it. And we'll move on to Caden Curry, the edge rusher that we watched this week, a guy that was at Ohio State for 3 seasons. He really produced in 2025, man. That Ohio State defense was so freaking good. You guys, if you don't watch college football and you're just NFL people like caught up on the draft and want to get caught up in the draft, we're going to be watching a lot of guys that are going to have Ohio State logos next to their name on the defensive side of the ball in this 26 class. And I think also in 5 years, they're not guys that, oh yeah, I remember that guy went in the first round. They're also going to be guys that are going to be playing very well in the NFL, in my opinion. We'll talk about those other guys some other days. And also the defensive coordinator. I called him Ryan Day on the Caden Curry video that I did. I met Matt Patricia. They just look alike. If you ever look at them, they got a similar beard. They got kind of a similar, you can kind of tell that they have I don't want to say a feminine face under the beard, but, they kind of have we'll say like soft features under the beard. And I just felt so stupid because I knew it wasn't. I knew Ryan Day's the head coach and not the defensive coordinator. But yeah, Matt Patricia, a guy that was a great defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's a great defensive coordinator in college football as well. The players that he has on that defense, a lot of guys that are going to be very good NFL football players. But we're talking about Caden Curry today, the edge rusher. A lot of those other guys, guys that were big-time recruits coming out of high school. Caleb Downs, for example, just one of the names. But Caden Curry wasn't really that guy that really had to kind of carve out a role in this Ohio State defense. He did that over the past 3 seasons. I got the numbers right here. I'm trying to do the math in my head. He had 4.5 sacks his entire college football career, 2022 to 2024. 2025, he absolutely feasted. That is an Ohio State defense that has a lot of mouths to feed. Caden Curry certainly cut himself out a piece, certainly ate very well in 2025. He finished with 11 sacks, 16.5 tackles for losses, 66 tackles. And you watch the film, it is just full go from start to finish. How long is a college football game? 60 minutes, right? 15 by 4. All 60 minutes is just a full go. It's not a guy that's motor's just on. He's not a guy that's just going for a cruise and the motor's on. That motor's going 10,000 revolutions per minute. If you were in that car, you'd be afraid that motor's going to blow up. But Caden Curry, just so violent with the hands. You get blown away by the violence, and then you actually kind of slow yourself down and you watch how he actually moves. He's a pretty good athlete, despite good to go alongside with that violence. He's listed at, I think I got it right here, 6'3", 250. Let me just double check on that number. I want to make sure we're being fair to Caden Curry. I can't wait for the combine because then we can actually have these real numbers. He's listed at 6'3", 260, so guy that doesn't have wicked length. I also don't think the athletic profile is over the top like it will be with some guys, but I really do think that everything is good enough to get excited about Caden Curry, and it's all about the violence. The hands are always going as a pass rusher. You're going to watch how violent the hands are. It is just pure violence. A lot of sacks he just wins on pure will alone. And he also has adequate frame, adequate length, and I think the bend as well on the first step. So I actually think his first step is great, and I don't think he's the most explosive athlete. So I think he does a very good job of coming out of his stance real clean, getting uphill, getting that first step off and timing the snap as well. You kind of see him playing with an advantage to offensive tackles, even though they might have the length and they might have the athleticism to compensate. He just gets off of the snap so well. Does a very good job timing the snap, timing the count, getting off the ball, and then it's just pure violence, pure, the fury of Caden Curry gets unleashed on the offensive tackle every goddamn snap. And really like the violence, the hand usage as well. The thing that are working against him is the same things that work for him. The explosiveness, the bend, it's good enough. It's not anything better than that. There's a couple clips where you see him trying to get around the corner and you just kind of see his ankles just do not go that way. You kind of see it, I'm trying to do it with my hands right now. You'll kind of see it start to go like that, and his entire body just falls down. You can just tell he doesn't really bend that way. So there's going to be freakier pass rushers. If you want a freakier pass rusher, don't think that Caden Curry's a guy that's going to be real high on your board. But if you want a guy that's going to bring a real attitude and a real edge to your run game or into your pass rush game, I definitely think Caden Curry has the violence and the athletics to a certain extent to get after the quarterback. Now, that's not the real concern. I think the athleticism is good enough. To me, I don't think that this guy is very versatile in what you're going to line him up in at the next level. You know, he's 6'3", 260. And I don't think that the functional strength is good enough to really talk about him playing anything outside of a defensive end in a four-man front. And this is kind of where I might divide with a lot of other draft experts because, in theory, his frame should be good enough to play that defensive end in a three-man front. And you kind of hear other people highlight this versatility as a good thing. As a pass rusher, it is 100%. He is 100% a versatile football player. You saw Ohio State line him across the entire defensive line on specific pass rushing downs over the center. I love doing that. I love putting this guy against a center on a pass rushing down, and then you can get those freaks onto the football field. Get those guys with that crazy bend, with that crazy first step on the edge, and then put Caden Curry over a guard or over a center. I would love that. I love the idea of that. I just think in a run defense, on those running downs, I don't think you get much out of him. First, as an edge defender, I think he's good enough because of that violence, and I think he is strong enough to do it at an okay level. I don't think it's anything special. The edge setting or the run defense, we'll call it. I think that's just okay, and then I definitely don't think it's good enough to do anything except on that outside on an offensive tackle. I don't think he's a space eater in any sense of the word. I just don't think he's strong enough to do that. That's the one thing is, you know, as violent as he is, I'm not sure. I'm not so sold on the functional strength that Caden Curry has, but the violence. Second round. That's the range. Did I do round grades for everybody else? Fernando Mendoza early first. Jermod McCoy, I'm gonna. That's a question mark. I don't know. Depends how he does at the combine, or if teams are sold on the combine or on the history, and then we'll have a better idea. Caden Curry to me is a second rounder. Don't think he's gonna sneak into the first round. And I would not be surprised if we hear him called in the third round, but I don't really see him falling any further than that. I mean, he brings a real edge to the defensive line. And if I'm not going to recommend that you guys go watch any of these videos. I'd appreciate it if you do. I am going to recommend to do it. I'd really appreciate it. I think you'll get a lot more out of it than just me talking about it, because you can kind of see I have these feelings for a reason. I might be wrong in them. I might be looking at the film wrong, but the film does exist. I'm not just kind of pulling this out of my ass. But with Caden Curry, I think you'll have a good time watching his film for sure. Especially Caden Curry. Second round. All right, we'll move on to Mike Washington, the Arkansas running back, a guy that started his college football career in New Mexico State. No, excuse me. Started at Buffalo, played 3 seasons at Buffalo. I love Mike Washington Jr.'s story. I don't know what the story is, but just looking at the stat sheet story, I think it's awesome. So he played 3 seasons at Buffalo. Just looking at the stats, 130 yards in 21, 625 in 22, 360 in 23. So, at an AAC school, a group of 5 school, nothing real special. Nothing that's going to really, get us too much of a hard on for Mike Washington. And then 725 at New Mexico State in 24. So again, pretty good season. He averaged 4.6 per carry. In a group of 5 school, okay, it is what it is. He moves up to the SEC. Sam Pittman saw something in Mike Washington, adds him to the Arkansas roster, and he had a great 2025. He finished with 1,070 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6.4 yards per carry. Also, actually met his entire career's receiving yards, or he's pretty close to it. He finished with 226 in 2025. He had 470 his entire career. So, the production just completely skyrocketed in 2025, and the film's just as good as the production. So I really like, it's kind of cool. He just kind of came out of nowhere, very productive, and now we're talking about him as a potential day 2 pick. So what does Mike Washington do? Well, 6'2", 220. So 6'2", 220, big running back. Really love the lateral agility. I think he changes direction real easy. He's really shifty. I think he's elusive in the open field. That's good. I also really love the acceleration when he gets into the second level. You can just kind of tell once he gets about 5 yards, he has a second gear that he's just going to floor the gas. That gas goes to the floor, and Mike Washington just accelerates into the second level, where he's still elusive. He still does a good job kind of avoiding people in the second level and just consistently adds yards when he's into the second level. Now, I do think his top end speed is limited. I don't know if I talked about this on the video. I think you can just kind of tell he just loses gas after he steps on. While that gas is humming about 30 yards, he just kind of runs out of gas in that tank when he gets about 30 yards. And that kind of limits him as a home run hitter. I don't get too caught up in the 30 to 40. I think when you got a running back that can get there consistently, it's a pretty dang good running back, right? Guy that consistently has 30-yard runs, feel good about him. So, yeah, the acceleration, the frame. I also think the receiving ability is really good. Now, this is where I'm also going to deviate. Everything I've said about Mike Washington, you go pull up his Draft Buzz website or his Mel Kiper website. That's what they're talking about. Now, they don't think Mike Washington's a good receiver, and I actually disagree. I think he's a very good receiver. He definitely produced in 25. They just kind of highlight him not running great routes or him not running an extensive route tree. I just hate when people kind of bring up what they did in college or what they were asked to do in an offense as a reason to not draft him. I think that Mike Washington has the athletic ability to run all types of routes, the lateral agility, the acceleration. There's a wheel route on the highlight tape that you'll just see him just so easily pull past the linebacker for a big gain. At 6'2", he's a big target. I think he's a pretty natural hands catcher. Really like what he does as a receiver. And also, people are going to talk about the pass protection. I'm so excited about Mike Washington's pass protection upside. Now, he did not do good at that in 2025. He was actually a liability as a pass protector, and I don't think it was because he didn't want to do it. I think every snap that you saw, Mike Washington was engaged. He wanted to make a block. It's just the technique wasn't really there. And, what he kind of did, and you guys feel free, if you think like I'm off base and this is a coaching point and you think if you coached and this is wrong, please let me know. But you'll see offensive linemen, obviously in their pass set, they're getting depth. They're letting that edge rusher make their decision, and then they'll kind of punch. Mike Washington, he almost gets into his pass set when he's as a running back. So when you're getting depth as a pass blocker, as a running back, you're losing so much yards, and you're just giving it straight alley to the quarterback. And Mike Washington, instead of being aggressive and stepping up, you could see he saw the guy that was the free rusher that was coming through. Mike Washington, instead of just kind of meeting him in the hole and delivering a block with his big frame, 6'2", 220, that's why I think he'll be good at it. He just would kind of wait for him, and then that pass rusher kind of made a move on him, and he just wasn't able to make a block on him. So definitely needs a lot of work, a lot of technique. Needs to be instilled into Mike Washington and his past. Mike Washington Jr., by the way, he's a junior. I don't know if I said that, but Mike Washington Jr., definitely the technique needs to get worked on, but I definitely think he's got upside because of how big he is. Also, I want to talk about the power. So I'm kind of divided on Mike Washington. I love this story. I think he's going to be a good NFL back, but are we talking about round 2 for him? I think he's a third round running back. I definitely think day 2 right now, but I just kind of have to think about him a bit more. But I'm sitting at round 3. So the reason is he doesn't have a prototypical running back frame. At 6'2", 220, he's just never going to win that leverage battle, and he just kind of struggles to lean into his contact balance in those short yard situations because he has such a natural high pad level. Now, we really saw that power. He becomes very powerful, don't get me wrong, when he's at his top speed at that 20-yard mark. There's a play against Texas where Michael Taff is coming to make a tackle on him. And when I say it's like a train just runs through like a trash can on the train tracks, that's what it looks like. Not trying to disrespect Michael Taff, former walk-on, got a lot of respect for his story. But, I mean, Mike Wash, it was just like an unstoppable force meets a movable object on that play. So when he gets to his top speed, he is a 262, 220 human being moving very fast. He's very powerful in that regard. I just don't think you see it show up until he hits that top end speed, just because he's a bit more upright at 6'2". You can't really just use a natural low center of gravity like we'll talk about some of the shorter running backs in this class. So that's one thing that's working against him. I don't think he's that explosive. And this is something else that I'm going to deviate with other people, because I do think people think he's a lot more twitched up than he actually is. And usually you'll kind of see that those guys that can kind of change direction the way that Mike Washington does at a very high level, the lateral agility, that same twitch kind of translates into them just kind of hitting a hole and exploding in that initial burst. I just don't think that Mike Washington has that initial burst. I think he just kind of takes a little bit longer to get going. That's just my opinion, but also the vision. So this is kind of a mixed bag, because there'll be some times, especially when he gets into the second level, he does a very good job in the second level understanding when a a receiver's blocking to where he should kind of bounce it off of that receiver's ass or if he should cut it up. He does a very good job at that. So the vision there is really good. I just think every now at the line of scrimmage, I know it's easier for me to do when I'm like slowing the video down and I'm like, oh, you should have hit this hole, but at the same time it was something that showed up pretty often where Mike Washington, he wanted to bounce it, and you can just kind of see there's a hole right in front of him, and you see where Mike Washington's head's looking, and he's looking at it, and he just kind of keeps bouncing it, and it ends up going for a loss when he really, really could have just like burst through that hole for like a 5-yard gain. So that was the one thing that I was that's why I'm kind of like, there's a couple reasons to say no to Mike Washington. I'm going to have him in the 3rd round, I think. But there are people that, know more about football than me that say he's a 2nd-round pick. And I do understand why that conversation is being had. But me personally, going round 3 for Mike Washington right now. We're going to now talk about USC wide receiver Jakobi Lane. Watched this film this week. Got the career numbers. Not really any one season where he produced like crazy. Finished with 745 receiving yards in 2025. He did have 12 touchdowns in 24 as a sophomore. He also finished with 525 receiving yards. So 12 touchdowns, pretty good. I don't get too caught up in the production, especially when he's a guy that was in an offense with Mekhi Lemon. Wait till we watch Mekhi Lemon's highlight film. We're going to have a good time with him. We're so excited about him. But yeah, Jakobi Lane in his own right, really good wide receiver. So we'll talk about him right now. Yeah, Jakobi Lane 6'4", that's what I thought. So taller wide receiver, the body contortion is great. His ability to adjust to footballs. He's definitely a red zone threat. But what I really like about Jakobi Lane, I get so excited about these 6'4" wide receivers when we feel good about them downfield, because I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to say this on the other videos, but I'll tell you right now, I think the goal line fade is one of the most overrated plays in college, in football in general. And I don't think that it's good process to draft a guy that's a goal line specialist at wide receiver. Because first of all, it's like, okay, you're throwing a 50-50 ball. And is this guy worth a roster spot if that's all you ask him to do? And then it's like with this tush push now, when you can just kind of just force the ball into the end zone, I really don't think that those lower percentage plays are really worth it. And I haven't watched that much NFL. I don't know if they still throw them, but I used to get I would get actually like visibly pissed when I watched NFL football and they just start throwing these goal line fades, these very low percentage throws, and it's like just a waste of a down. I'm like, you see, I'm getting all flustered about it now. But the reason that I love guys like this is when you like them downfield, well, I think a 40-yard bomb is one of the most valuable plays in football. When you got a guy that can get open downfield, your quarterback doesn't have to be too accurate when he's throwing a 6'4" wide receiver downfield. I think Jakobi Lane now, there is some serious concerns about the separation. I don't think he's going to run a great 40 time. I don't think his straight line speed is great, but he is such a good route runner, and he does a very good job of kind of understanding where to get open downfield. He brings in all kinds of throws because of how physically gifted he is. At 6'4", he's a big receiver, sure. Can also contort his body and track the ball very well. There's a lot of throws on the tape that Jane Mayava kind of just throws up and just says, frig it. Jakobi Lane's down there somewhere. He'll bring it in. He does bring it in at a very high clip. So I think those throws, this is the kind of guy that you want on your roster, not because of the goal line situations. That's something you can work in, sure. I just think that he does such a good job of doing it downfield as well. I love these guys that are 6'4", because those harder throws downfield all of a sudden become very accurate. You kind of like, if you got a guy that's 5'9", Andy Isabella, that runs like a 4.2 40, it's just like, okay, you can take the top off of the defense, but you got to be so accurate to him downfield. Not the case with Jakobi Lane. So, yeah, the frame, the athleticism at the catch point are great. Really love his route running. For a guy that's 6'4", it's just so under control. I think he changes direction real easy. We're going to watch a guy next week, Ted Hurst, and it's going to be kind of the same thing, and I kind of wish that he didn't do it as well, because then it kind of sounds like I'm just saying the same stuff over and over again. But Jakobi Lane, for a guy that's 6'4", has dominant as he is at the catch point, the way that he attacks the football consistently, he's got really strong hands away from the body. I think that he changes direction really good for a guy that's also going to be real dominant at the catch point. So you got a guy that's going to get open to begin with. You don't have to be as accurate to him because he's 6'4", and because he really uses every inch of that length. That's what it is. Jakobi Lane, to begin with, is a very big wide receiver. I think he also maximizes the length that he was given by God. So God gave him the length. Jakobi Lane knows how to use that. That's why I think he's a pretty good wide receiver. Now, what's working against him, like I said, the straight line speed's not great. I don't think his 40-yard time is going to be very important. There's some guys that, I'll say that the combine's important, and I'll just kind of mean that. I don't think they're going to do good at the combine, and you're going to kind of see them fall down the draft board a little bit. We're going to say that with Gennings Dunker in a little bit. Jakobi Lane, I do think it is important because I am kind of divided on it. I think it was a mixed bag on the highlight tape where you just don't really know how fast he's in a straight line. And if he runs in the 4.4s, I do think this is a guy that's a lock to go day 2. I think if he would have went back to USC, got a bit faster, this would have been a first rounder maybe in 2027. Such a loaded class next year. That's kind of hard to say a year out, but I think his best football could be ahead of him. Now, that's everything. That's some stuff everybody else is saying. Also, concentration drops are kind of a problem with Jakobi Lane. Every now and then you'll just kind of see he doesn't look it in, and he does a good job attacking it, doesn't let it get to his body. Just every now and then you'll just kind of see it just kind of fall on his hands. It'll look like he has hard hands every now and then, but not a big concern. Now, what concerns me about Jakobi Lane, this is why I say on those other videos, we're going to get a lot more controversial on this. Loafs. I counted a lot of loafs on the highlight tape, so I think there'd be some run blocks that you'll see Mekhi Lemon on the backside just completely work his ass off, and then you'll see Jakobi Lane on the front side where they're running the ball, and it's just like, that's the best effort you can give. You're such a big receiver at 6'4". I think we can ask a little bit more out of you as a run blocker. And it's a mixed bag. There were some times where he did it real well, just on the highlight. It showed up too many times for me to not say anything on this right now. And that wasn't the major area for concern. There were some routes also when he's on the backside of the progression. There's one route that he catches over the middle. And you know how, the reason that I can tell that he's not at full speed or he's not as fast out of his brakes is because we see how aggressive he is out of his brakes when he is going full tilt. It happens so fast. He's such a good route runner. There's some on the backside of the progression where you just kind of see him a lot slower, and it's not because he can't do it. We know that he can do it. Just kind of feels like he doesn't take those backsides of the progression as serious as you kind of want him to. And, of course, when you're talking about effort, it is a very how do you call it, subjective thing. I don't think everybody's going to come away from the tape seeing that, but it is something that I thought I saw. But he is a young football player, only 3 seasons at USC, so about as young as you're going to find, or I should say, on the younger end. So just something that I saw with Jakobi Lane. But yeah, I think if he runs, I'm going to not even care about, I'm going to keep it real with you guys right now just because you're watching this. I kind of care about the effort. I also think in college football that these guys are kind of, especially now, by the way, are coddled because of the transfer portal. You can't be too aggressive on these guys, otherwise they're going to transfer. Otherwise they're going to go get their NIL money from somewhere else. I don't know how aggressive he's being coached. Of course, in the NFL, it's a different situation. I'm sure that it won't be an issue with an NFL coaching staff kind of on his ass because the power dynamics completely shift. I think it's so interesting, and this is a conversation for a different day, but, with NFL free or college football free agency now, you can't really trust these college coaches to be real tough on these guys, especially the bigger recruits. Now, Jakobi Lane was a 3-star coming out of high school, and he was in a very loaded class with Deuce Robinson, Mekhi Lemon. I'm not trying to downplay that he's I'm not saying he's lazy. I'm not saying anything like that. I just think that I think we can kind of feel better about that kind of stuff getting eradicated at the next level because, the NFL teams are the ones with the power, especially for the first 4 or 5 years of a rookie contract. So, yeah, Jakobi Lane, I'm buying his long-term upside, especially if he comes out and runs a good 40 time. So what is a good 40 time? I don't know. I'd say 4.55 is what I think would be a good number. 4.5 will be a good number for Jakobi Lane. Anything better than that, and then I think he's a day 2 lock. But yeah, I don't think we see him in the 4.6s. I think he's faster than that. But I'm so bad at doing this, by the way. I don't even know why I set myself up for failure. It's very difficult. And then you got guys, go watch Denzel Mims coming out of Baylor. Watch his tape, and then look at the 40 time he ran. It's like, that guy does not run a 4.3. It's just kind of, they start training for a 40-yard dash, and they're a lot faster than they might actually play with. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make, Jakobi Lane, I think the combine's going to be very important, and if he runs a good 40 time, if the testing kind of picks up, I think we're going to be talking about him as a day 2 wide receiver. To be completely honest, I think we're going to talk about him as a day 2 wide receiver anyway. I'm just kind of in the camp of, I'm going to see that 40 time, and then I'm going to put him in the second round. Right now, I got him at the top of the 3rd round. We got 2 more players, Gennings Dunker and Keionte Scott. We'll do Keionte Scott since we just did 2 offensive players in a row. So Keionte Scott is a nickel back, defensive back that played at Miami in 2025. He played 3 seasons at Auburn. he was a very big part of this Miami defense in 25. Of course, he wasn't the guy. It's kind of hard to say that when you have Ruben Bain. But, I mean, I got to tell you, this Miami turnaround on the defensive side of the ball, like, I know they just lost the national championship. I know how good they were in 2025. Of course, there's a lot of good players on the offense, Malachi Toney and Mark Fletcher, blah, blah, blah. The offensive line, how good it was. But just imagine this Cam Ward offense in 24 had this 25 defense. Oh, my God, that Miami team would be unstoppable. They were pretty unstoppable this season. But anyway, Keionte Scott was kind of that Energizer Bunny in the second level. I think that the effort that you saw Ruben Bain kind of made him the Energizer Bunny on the defensive front. I think Keionte Scott kind of mirrors him in that regard in the defensive back end. And this is like the third time I brought Ruben Bain up today on a video that's not even about Ruben Bain, but it's a good football player, so he's gonna keep getting brought up till it's otherwise. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Keionte Scott. I'm biased to Keionte Scott because I like the good football players. So I'm biased to Keionte Scott because I think he's a really good football player. And this is a guy, if you want to know a little something about me, like I just get so excited about these guys that have that great athletic upside, just the athleticism, and then you're going to work on everything else. So I think Keionte Scott's a nickelback at the next level. That's what he did at Miami. That's what he did at a very good level at Miami. He had 5 sacks in 2025, man. If you watch Keionte Scott's tape, this dude just comes flying off the edge like a banshee on these nickel blitzes. You know, I mean, there was one play against Florida State where, you know, Tommy Castellanos was at. I'm trying to draw this up in my head right now, but I got to get like a whiteboard. Like I wish I had space on that whiteboard so I could use it. But I got like a little. People listen to this on Spotify. If you're listening to this on Apple Music, check out the YouTube video and you'll be able to do it. But I'll draw it up real quick. So there was like a play where Tommy Castellanos was like on the opposite hash as Keionte Scott, and he's a right-hander, so he's obviously like backside. And Keionte Scott, so if you don't know how wide this is, like that's pretty dang. Those are the 2 hash marks right there. That's where Keionte Scott is right there. That's where Tommy Castellanos is. So he's right-handed, so he's backside to him. And pre-snap, as far as Keionte Scott was from Tommy Castellanos, could never really, if you're Tommy in that situation, you can't really get worried about that guy blitzing you, especially as fast as he got there, because that's a long distance. That's a lot of yards that he would have to cover to make an impact on the quarterback. So we can't even fault the quarterback for not accounting for him coming off the edge. But yeah, so Tommy's like looking for a pass. His back's to that side. Keionte Scott just completely erases that entire cushion, makes a very big hit on Tommy's backside, and he actually got the ball out before, like right as he was getting there, so he didn't get a sack on that. But man, if that SMU game as well was the same thing. He just, that explosiveness, I think that I should have waited till the combine happened to talk about him, because he's really going to test well in Indianapolis because of how explosive he is and the closing speed. Man, there's some plays against SMU. I think that was one of the games Miami lost this season. It was, right? I'm not going crazy. Anyways, Keionte Scott played so well in that game. There was one where he's blitzing. I'm not going to do the drawing again. That was stupid and a waste of time. But there was a play where Keionte Scott was blitzing, and it was just like, you know, it was like outside zone to the other side, and somehow he just gets all the way to the running back on the other side. There's another play where the quarterback was rolling out to the right, and Keionte Scott was stalking him from the opposite hash, and instead of kind of taking that direct line like we saw him do on Tommy, he kind of went all the way around and still was able to cut off the quarterback, Jennings, who's a good athlete, and force an incomplete pass. So anyways, what is the point that I'm trying to make here? This guy's got really rare athletic traits. The explosiveness, his hips are very fluid as well. There's another play against SMU on a whip route where we talked about Jermod McCoy doing that at such a high level. Similar thing with Keionte Scott. You guys got to check that video out also, because this is one of the craziest things I've ever seen on a football field, you know, watching the film after. It was like a whip route, so he's coming in and then coming out the wide receiver. The way Keionte Scott did it, it kind of made me question my existence, because it kind of felt like it was like a glitch in the Matrix, because Keionte Scott timed it so well where he pushed off of that left foot, that inside foot, and he did the same exact thing the receiver did. And, you know, I was going through an existential crisis after I watched that, because it's like, was this planned? Is college football like premeditated? Am I in the Matrix right now? But, you know, of course, it's just Keionte Scott's athleticism. Man-to-man, so we didn't really see him in as much man-to-man coverage because every time that Miami would send more pressure, Keionte Scott was the one coming. So he wasn't really in that much man coverage. But the one thing that you worry about Keionte Scott with is the size. And he's listed at 6 foot, 200. It's just not that long. And there's a lot of plays, or there's one play especially, again, against SMU. We keep talking about the SMU game. There's a tight end that just kind of runs like a little corner, and Keionte Scott, man, he has great coverage on him. There's not really any space for that quarterback to throw to, and then the quarterback just kind of puts it on his head, and the tight end just goes like that, and Keionte Scott just can't make a play on the ball because of how much bigger the tight end is than him. So that was the one thing with him, and then the tackling for him as well. He's so aggressive. It's not for a lack of effort. He wants to make a play on the ball carrier. But when we watch D'Angelo Pons next week, you guys will know like what the good tackling looks like because he's a very technical tackler. He wants to get after it as well. Keionte Scott wants to get after it. He just doesn't really have the tackling technique, and it's pretty bad. There's some plays where he did the right thing. He's in a position to make a play on the ball carrier. He just kind of dives at his ankles or like puts his head to the side so he can't really react to what's happening, and you'll just kind of see consistently yards get added to the end of the catch because Keionte Scott kind of misses a tackle in space. But the other point about that, yeah, there was one screen. Now, this wasn't the SMU game, but you can just kind of tell they would just pass on Keionte Scott and get into the next level because they knew in space that was the guy that they wanted to isolate because he will miss tackles in space. So that was it with Keionte Scott. But as an athlete, this is one of the guys I'm biased against just because I think everything happens athletically so easy. I think he's got as much upside as any defensive back in this class. He is a bit of an older prospect. He spent a lot of seasons at Auburn, so maybe that's a point of concern. I think age is the most overrated concern, to be honest, because it's like, if you want to say, okay, he can't get better because he would have done it by now, that's a different story, but it's like, most of these guys don't make it out of the rookie contract anyway. Wouldn't you want the guy that's a bit more polished throughout that entire rookie contract when he's at his max value? And then it's like, are they really going to tail off after that 3-year deal that you give them after their rookie contract? They're still going to be 28 at that point. Running back's a different question, but I just don't love when people say, yeah, he's an older prospect. Especially with quarterbacks, because it's like they can, I don't know. I just think it's a dumb concern. I understand why it gets brought up because like you want more of their prime, but I just feel like if you get to that, I feel like you should be trying to get to that prime to begin with, and then the question is I don't know. I just think it's an overrated concern. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Keionte Scott. I think athleticism trades well. I think size is the main thing that's kind of keeping me from saying he's a second round lock. But I got a day 2 grade on him, a second round grade on him, I should say. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes a bit further than that, but. I think D'Angelo Pons will be the first nickelback taken, and he didn't play nickel in college, but it seems like that's what he's going to do at the next level. I got to watch more defensive backs, by the way. I haven't watched more with the 3 that we talked about today. We're going to do Pons next week, but I haven't watched enough of the other guys to make an opinion on him. I guess Delane I have, but Keionte Scott, yeah, round 2 for me. And the last player that we'll talk about today is the offensive lineman, Gennings Dunker, a guy that really was not a big-time recruit coming to Iowa. So I didn't know this. Somebody commented on the video, but I guess Iowa wasn't really recruiting him. I think he was a 3-star, but you can't really trust the star grades because as soon as these guys commit to big schools, they'll go from a 0-star to a 3-star sometime. But the point was that Iowa was actually recruiting some other kid that went to his high school, and they just saw Gennings Dunker in the hallway, and they offered him on the spot because of how big he was. So he's getting mocked in the first round, and he's listed as an offensive tackle. He played right tackle at Iowa. Really think this guy's an interior offensive lineman at the next level, and I'll make that case throughout. But we'll get started with what he does really well. He's so strong. I said he's probably the strongest offensive lineman in the class in the video. He's probably the strongest football player in the class. I'm saying that in this video right now. I think he might be the strongest player in the class. And what's crazy to me about Gennings Dunker is sometimes you'll just see him go like this with the right arm, and it won't even be that aggressive. It'll just kind of be nonchalant, and then you'll just kind of see the other dude. I don't know if you guys ever seen the Dave Chappelle skit with it's not Rick Ross. Rick James, where Charlie Murphy kicks Rick James, who's Dave Chappelle, and he just kind of goes like this. There's some plays where you'll just see Gennings Dunker go like that, and then the dude just looked like he got kicked in like the abdomen or somewhere, and he just goes flying across the field. And in the video I said it looked like he got shot. It really looks like the dude just took like a buckshot to the chest, the way that they just move when Gennings Dunker just hits them like very nonchalant. So I think the power that Gennings Dunker just has statically in his hands, one of the most impressive things I've seen. He's listed at 6'5". I gotta get these written. He's definitely 6'5" is the listed height, and I just want to be certain about the weight. 6'5", 290. So, upper body strength, so strong. He is a very strong run defender. Starts with that strength. It's also the hand placement. Everything happens inside. The legs are always churning. If you got this guy on the sled, he's a guy that probably could put the sled into the bleachers if he wanted to. As a run blocker, man, he's a lot to get excited with. So why am I kind of pumping the brakes on Gennings Dunker if he's so dominant in the run game like I'm saying he is? He was also second team Big Ten in 2024, by the way. Man, he's not a good athlete, and I hate saying that because I think everybody in the NFL is a good athlete in the strict sense, but when we start comparing them to each other for an offensive lineman, I just think Gennings Dunker really struggles to move, I would say in a straight line, but it's in all kind of lines. I think that he is not long, so at 6'5", that could be adequate to play tackle, but you look at the arm length, it's not prototypical. That is the starting reason to move him inside, but then he doesn't have the athleticism to kind of mitigate the fact that he doesn't have arm length to the outside. So you want him to be a bit more athletic to compensate for that. He certainly doesn't have that. As soon as you say that, to me, that means he's going to be playing guard. So he's very wide. I'll tell you that. You take a look at Gennings Dunker and you'll be like amazed by how wide he is. And then you'll look at the arm length. It looks very disproportionate. So he's not a great athlete in a straight line. He's not explosive at all. I'm not sure he has a twitch muscle in his entire body. You'll see him just try to pass protect to his outside shoulder, and that first step, it's just so slow. So when you're playing guard, you don't have to protect your outside shoulder as well because you got a tackle there and, of course, a center to your other side. So I think the athleticism makes tackle a non-starter for Gennings Dunker. I also think you're limited in the scheme that you're going to draft him in. I don't think this is a guy that fits a zone scheme at the next level where you kind of want a guy to stay square to the line of scrimmage, be real agile, getting to the second level, coming off a double team, getting all the way up to a linebacker. That's not what Gennings Dunker does well. So I definitely think guard. I definitely think gap scheme in the NFL. That is. So I think that the pad level is a serious concern as well. The other stuff is like he is what it is in that regard. That's just the player that he is. He's also a guy that very much struggles to keep a low pad level. I think it starts with that athleticism or lack thereof. I think he struggles to kind of bend at the knees. You'll watch the film and it'll be like everything's so technically well. I know this guy takes coaching great. I know he's great in the locker room. I know he brings a great ferocity to the offensive line and a guy that just takes coaching very well. Like we said before, the legs are turning, the hands are inside. Technically everything happens well, except that he has a very high pad level. To me, that's something that's what he is. Look, I think he really struggles to bend at the knees. I think that he's just never going to really win those leverage battles. And if you want to ask, okay, what does that mean? Why is it important? There's some times where that same violence that we see just kind of dormant in his upper body, we'll see him come on a down block on a tackle. You'll see an initial jolt, and that's the upper body strength, and then you'll just see it completely die, and he just cannot drive a big defensive tackle as far as you kind of want him to. Now, I'm curious to see when he is very strong right now. It's just he doesn't have that leverage, that power to kind of start at his lower body, at his feet, and just kind of keep coming up to his upper body. He really struggles sometimes to get those bigger guys off their mark. So that's really the biggest concern to me. The other stuff is kind of like, look, he's just a guard at the next level. This stuff might kind of prohibit him to be a successful NFL offensive lineman, but I think the other stuff that we started with, the strength, the static strength, the way his legs just keep churning, the hands on the inside, the mauler, the intensity that he brings to the run game. I think that's too exciting to really talk about the limitations, seeing Gennings Dunker fall any further than the second round. But I think you're out of your goddamn mind, in my opinion, if you think this is a first round tackle. I think you're out of your mind. And I also don't think you see a team that runs a zone scheme draft him. I just really don't know how you could ever justify that pick, because it's just a waste of a pick. He's just not going to do what you ask him to do well. But, in a gap scheme, in a power scheme where you're asking him on down blocks, when you're asking him to kind of pull and kick out a tackle, I think he could do that at a high level. So I got a second round grade on him. I'll tell you right now, I wouldn't be too, if you see him fall day 2, it's not going to be because he's not a good player. It's going to be because that value is just not really matching what teams are looking for. Because I think that you'll see a lot of people that don't follow football, and if they watch the draft and they see Gennings Dunker's rated in the top 20 for McShay or Kuiper, whoever does the boards, and if they see him fall, and they'll be like, oh, why does their team not draft him? And then they run his own scheme. It's like you're just not going to get as much out of Gennings Dunker as some other teams are. That value is just not there for you to pick him. So I think you'll see him kind of slip day 2. He could potentially slip day 2 because of that. I don't think that it's a lock. I think he's a day 2 pick or a round 2 pick for sure. I just see him getting mocked in the first round, and I just think it's crazy. And I love the story. A guy that, like I said, Iowa wasn't even taking him serious till they went there, and they just took one look at him. And his mullet, he's got this crazy mullet. I don't know if he had it in high school, but I like the story, and he's going to be a very rich man because he's going to go in the second round. But yeah, definitely not a tackle, definitely not a zone interior offensive lineman, in my opinion. That's just my 2 cents, but I definitely think he's got some adequate deficiencies, or some adequate, what does that even mean? I definitely think he has some athletic deficiencies. I think that this is one of those guys that's going to have a very rough combine, and he's in favor right now. This is my theory, right? I've watched so much draft stuff. I know what I'm talking about a little bit. Not really, but a little bit. These are the kind of things I'm good at seeing. Not necessarily the football things. That's for you guys to decide. But I very much pay attention to the way people talk about players. And there's some guys where you watch the film and they are so good, and then people just kind of sit on it and they just don't watch it, and then they start getting too caught up in, maybe how they interview, maybe how they are at the combine, maybe how whatever happens. When you start getting away from the film and you start seeing guys fall down boards, that just means people are starting to kind of talk themselves into somebody else. I think Gennings Dunker is a guy that is going to kind of be on the other end of that. He's a guy that, or he's going to be, let me make sure I enunciate this the right way or say this the right way. He's going to be a guy that they're going to start falling in love with other offensive linemen that have horrible tape, but they're going to test very well at the combine, or they're going to measure really long arms. They're going to be a lot more prototypical than Gennings Dunker. And Dunker at the same time is going to have a very bad combine because he's not going to run a good 40. He's going to run a bad 40. I think he's not going to jump well. But I'll tell you right now, when you see the offensive linemen driving sleds on the football field, when it's about stuff that is football related and it's not underwear related, Gennings Dunker's really going to stand out in that, because that's the stuff that he does well. So I think he's going to be a good NFL player. It's just, there is a reason why people get excited about the athletic stuff. That exists for a reason, but doesn't always work out. But we'll see. I still think he's a NFL football player. Definitely round 2 anyways. That was everybody that were responsible for this week. We'll have about, I think, more than 10 for next week's show, so I'm really excited for that. But in the meantime, you guys reach out. Let me know what you think about any of these players, any other topics. I think next week I'm going to start also collecting news stories, not necessarily just draft things, but maybe college football related, NFL football related. We'll talk about that on next week's show. But yeah, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to have all the social medias scrolling on the screen, but it's King Cold Sports on X, King Cold Sports on Instagram, We Draft Site on Instagram. If you're going to follow me on Instagram, I think I'm a lot more active on We Draft Site. And then, of course, the YouTube channel, King Cold Sports. We're also on Apple Music. We're also on Spotify. I think that's really convenient if you just want to listen in the car and you want to hear some draft talk. I really like that for that. But I think that the YouTube video is where you'll get the most information, because you'll also have the stats on the screen. It's not just going to be me talking. You also get some video reference. That's a lot more of a consumer-driven product, in my opinion. Yeah, but I really appreciate you guys for watching. We'll be back on Friday this week. Please enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good day.